As a medicine, it's been suggested to do everything. Some of these have some standing, pain control, but others are downright dangerous. We'll talk about coughs later on. The first description was in the Dublin Press for toothache, in which an extraction of chili could be used to prevent the pain of toothache. But as you can see, there's a whole variety with all different pathogenesis. Some of these are obviously inflammatory, some of these are infection, and some of them are metabolic diseases. So a whole variety of different diseases peppers have been suggested to control. So, where do we start? Well, the first studies began to appear in the early and later part of the 19th century. And the first thing to do was to isolate the active components. For black peppers, it's pepperin, and for chilies, it's capsaicin. The structures were determined and pure preparations prepared. This is important if you want to investigate possible effects. If you take a normal extract like Nick has done today with the popcorn, this is not a capsaicin extract. This will probably contain about 200 to 300 different chemicals. Its major constituent is capsaicin, but it will have other chemicals there. So the isolation of individual chemicals is important for us to try and work out mechanisms and determine if there's any truth to the potential medical benefits. In 1912, the Scoville scale was set up. This was by a pharmacist in America, and it basically tried to measure the amount of heat. How this worked was there would be an alcohol preparation of the individual pepper. It would then be given to individuals, and they would measure if it caused a heat reaction in their mouth. The scale comes from the fact that this is how many times you need to dilute the solution before you lose the heat sensation. So for pure capsaicin, we have 15 million times serial dilution. Of course, we've moved on now, and the American Spy Society use modern analytical techniques to measure capsaicin, which they consider to be the element causing the heat in peppers. They use high-performance liquid chromatography. But it's amazing that I went back to this and I had a look at this scale, and I had a look at some of the pharmacology at molecular level, and indeed it actually measures up quite well. When I talk about some of the receptors, this level, when you dilute it down, it's about the limit of detection of some of the receptors involved in the sensing of capsaicin. For anybody who's interested, we measure capsaicin now as parts per million. So 15 parts per million represents 1 Scoville unit. Experimental pharmacology. This is me. This is Friday. This is what we should not do. As Nick is the health and safety officer, he should not be letting me do this. However, I do it all the time to students, so it doesn't make any odds. This is the effects of capsaicin on the arm as an inflammatory response. This is my arm. I've injected myself with three. It's not. We do this all the time. Don't worry about it.
I injected you.
Yeah, you injected me. Yes, you did. With 3 chemicals: bradykinin, histamine. From people who were on Monday, you was talking about anaphylaxis and peanuts. This is what kills you. Okay, histamine. This will give you the massive shock. Okay, I'm all right. It's not. It's only intradermal. This is capsaicin, or Ralgex. This is a 0.12% capsicum preparation, about a 0.1% capsaicin. This is after 2 minutes. You can see the redness. After 5 minutes, you can see there's quite massive response. Now, these are injected intradermally. This is topical. This is just on the skin. Okay, so there is a massive response. This is known as a wheal and flare reaction. Okay, that's the flare, the redness. The wheal is the edematous. Here you have a massive flare reaction. This is an axon reflex.
If anybody wants to go, we do have the rail jets.
No, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, unless you have some muscular pain. Okay, but you can see that the active components in chilies have a massive physiological response. Indeed, Hunan hand is a condition which workers with chilies get, in which their hands basically become massively inflamed, with massive hyperplasia, and eventually loss of feeling in their fingers. So there's a massive response, and we're putting these things in our mouths. So, we can see this massive response. We've got the chemical we think from chilies that's causing this response, or the main chemical. And up until the late 1980s, early 1990s, we had no idea how it worked. Why is this important? Well, the fact is, if you can find the target, you may be able to develop other drugs which have better efficacy. You could understand the biology, and that's important. If we're going to ever use this as a medicine, we've got to understand how it works, because if we can know how it works, we could possibly understand how it interacts with other chemicals. And was there evidence for an individual target? Well, evidence suggested that the physiological responses required a strict chemical structure. One of the things that chemists do and pharmacologists do is they take this chemical and they break it up. And what was found was this part, the valenoid, here, is absolutely required for its activity. Absolutely required. Break this ring and you'd have no activity. It suggested that there is some chemical target. The effects were well defined physiologically. We all responded the same. If I give you the cream and you put it on your arms, you will all inflame. It's not going to be a subpopulation. There is actually some variation in the human population. It appears that people, Afro-Caribbeans, don't respond that well to capsaicin as well as Europeans and Asians. The reason for this is not really known, and it's not been investigated, but there's some clinical evidence for that. And there's broad agreement across species, mammalian species at least, i.e. if we put this on the flank of a rat or a rabbit, it would respond like this as well. So this is a well-defined physiological response. Now, my research, I don't work on chilies, to be absolutely honest. I work on inflammation. Various conditions, actually mathematical modelling of inflammation at the moment, and various pathologies in which you have an inability to mount an inflammatory reaction. But inflammation has been around for a long time, and its description can really be traced back to Celsus in about 40 AD. And there's 5 classical signs of inflammation. We have heat, redness, swelling, pain, and finally loss of function. Loss of function was put on the list in about the 18th century by a bloke called Virchow, who was a pathologist. But can you see? Heat, redness, swelling. Well, if we go back to my arm, heat, it was warm. It is warm in your mouth. Redness and edematous, swelling. Actually, it's pretty painful as well. Okay? So you can't purvey that, but it is painful. So we have 4 of the classical signs of inflammation. Again, suggesting that our chemical is modulating the inflammatory process.